So while I'm out here in this little section of woods right next to North Metro, it's a little walking path, so I'm not breaking any laws or like breaking into any parks or anything like that. And quite frankly, doing something I almost never do because I'm not quite the outdoorsman. I usually prefer to explore the great indoors. But every once in a while, I like getting out into nature a little bit. I like getting outside, and even being in the woods like this, it's kind of nice to be isolated. It's quiet, and it's calm, and it's still. And I am a very, very, very extroverted person, and I expend a lot of energy when I'm around people, and people give me energy. And so sometimes it's profitable for me to get away, to isolate myself like this, and to enjoy the kind of calm, quiet, and disconnect. But I don't know what that note was I just hit. That was like early 90s Mariah Carey high note. Like, but sometimes if I'm doing something like this for too long, I can get a little antsy and it kind of wears on me. And I start to get to feel a little bit too isolated, or get to feel a little bit like lonely or even bored. And so while it's nice to be in isolation, it's nice to have that quiet and that calm. If it lasts too long, you start getting that feeling of like, oh gosh, oh no, isolation, it's setting in now. Or you start getting like really bored. And I feel like you can even start getting a little stir crazy. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, one of the greatest actors of our generation. But my man gets shipwrecked on this desert island. He's all by himself, and he's so isolated and so lonely and so bored that he goes crazy, and he finds a volleyball and he like paints a face on it and he names it Wilson. And like it's his best friend. My man loses his mind. And that just goes to show you that isolation, while it can be nice at first and quiet and calm and serene, it can wear on you, and you start to feel crazy, and you think, okay, enough is enough. Enough with the isolation. I'm all good. I'm all set now. And I think that might be where some of you guys are with this whole COVID-19 quarantine that we're in, this whole social distancing that we're in right now. I think when it first started, maybe some of us thought like, okay, I can mess with this. Like, I kind of like the serene and the calm. It's a different pace. And I mean, I hate that it's a pandemic. I hate that there's so much bad from it. But like me personally, I can kind of vibe with it for now. I think I'm okay with that. But now we're like coming up on 3 months in, and maybe you start to feel like, whoa, no. Way too isolated now. Now I'm way too bored. Now I feel like I'm going crazy. And maybe that's even starting to lead to some like depression, or just some severe disappointment. As you're like, well, okay, I just have to stand by and watch as literally all of my plans just get canceled. And so maybe you've had enough of this isolation. And quite frankly, as I talk to some of you, as I follow people on social media, this seems to be the popular opinion. I mean, everyone is had it up to here with the social distancing and the quarantine and the isolation. And I get that. I think all those measures are very wise. I hold to them. But I understand why you're feeling too isolated and you're starting to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go crazy. And so I want to speak into that today. And I want to start with our guiding question for the series. What if? What if, I'm going to offer the same suggestion I have every single week. What if the Lord is using this difficult, arduous, bad situation? What if he's in this season? What if he's bringing about some good from this bad? And to clarify again, I'm not saying the Lord caused this so that this good thing would happen. No, I'm not saying that. It's not my place to speak on behalf of the Almighty or to say why God does what he does. That is not my place. But what I can tell you is throughout Scripture, throughout the pattern of Scripture, throughout the pattern of our lives and what I've observed, the Lord always takes bad situations and brings about good. He takes hopeless situations and he brings about hope from that. He takes old, seemingly impossible, dead-end situations and brings new life and new things from those. That is just what the Lord does. And that's a good word even for society today, as people continue to lose their lives and their jobs. People continue to struggle with depression and disappointment. That's a good word. The Lord will take this bad situation. We're not saying who caused it, but he will bring a good about from it. And so I would suggest the same thing for you today. And perhaps even as we talked about the first week, as the Apostle Paul wrote, the Lord will work this out for some kind of deliverance. And we talked about how Paul wrote that from house arrest, which, is very similar. We can relate to that situation today. He writes that from house arrest as he's in prison, and he says, the Lord's actually work this out for my deliverance. Maybe there's some deliverance in this time of isolation. And so that's kind of our guiding premise for the series, our guiding question for the series. But then for today, I specifically want to ask this question. With all this isolation and kind of going crazy over this, what if in this isolation, God is using this time of isolation for formation and preparation? Let's say that again. What if the Lord is using this time of isolation for formation and preparation? And what if in this time, the Lord is going to prepare you for what he is going to call you to do? Now, the whole isolation, formation, preparation thing, let me just put my cards on the table real quick. I don't always love when pastors rhyme things because it makes it sound like it's either a line from a Dr. Seuss book or some like gentle freestyle rap. But I just wanted to use that as a helpful mnemonic device for you to remember. In this season, perhaps in the season of isolation, God is using the season of isolation for formation and preparation. He's going to prepare you for what he's going to call you to do. And as we talk about this and as we unpack this, I want you to know that, pay attention to this, this whole thing we're going to is not wasted in your life. That there is purpose to this process, because that's just how it works. That's how life works. That's how the Lord works. There is purpose to this process, so do not be discouraged. And so I want to look at some biblical examples today of people who are in seasons of isolation, people who are in seasons of uncertainty, people who are in seasons where they were literally in the wilderness, in this really funky meantime in between time between where I have been and where I'm going, and the whole thing in between seems really mysterious and odd, which is exactly what we're in. We're in this like weird wilderness season. I want to talk to you about some examples of this from the Bible, and I think we can derive some encouragement from this. So, first example, there's this guy named Moses, which we've talked about Moses in this series. We've talked about Moses in a lot of series. And Moses grew up in the house of Pharaoh in ancient Egypt. And he grew up as an Egyptian with Egyptians. He was big baller status. He was important. He had money. He had bread. He had a palace. But he was actually one of the children of Israel. But the awkward and ironic thing is that the children of Israel were actually enslaved in Egypt. So his people, Moses' people that he grew up with, the Egyptians, were enslaving his actual biological people, the children of Israel. So Moses was a man divided, and long story short, he has to leave Egypt because he killed someone defending an Israelite. He kills an Egyptian defending an Israelite. And he has to go out into the wilderness, just like you see around you. He had to go out into the wilderness. This place of uncertainty, this weird, where in between time from where he had been and where he was going. And he was in the wilderness, and he had to flee to this place called Midian. And it was a place he'd probably never been. He was a rich kid, lived in the palace. He probably had a guy for that. Like if he had to go out to Midian, he's like, I got a guy for that. Moses goes out to Midian, and check this out. In this weird meantime in between time of uncertainty, time in the wilderness, Moses happens upon these women at a well. And these women at this well are getting harassed by these Egyptian men. Now, we don't see that they were assaulted by them, but they were fearing that they might be. So Moses steps in, long story short again, because we ain't got time for all that. Moses tells these Egyptians to kick rocks, hit the road, and they flee. Moses saves these women. And these three women from this place called Midian, they go back to their father, who's one of the rulers of Midian, and they say, hey, this guy, Moses, helped, pay attention to this, deliver us from the hand of the Egyptians. He helped deliver us from the hand of the Egyptians. Keep that in mind. So Moses goes on and he lives with this people in the wilderness in Midian. And these years that he's there, he's not just sitting on his tush the whole time. And he's not just twiddling his thumbs. He's working. He's probably being a shepherd. He's being a family member. We learned that he's being a husband and a father. And Moses then, fast forward in the story, he gets to a point where the Lord appears to Moses and he calls him out. And he says, hey, Moses, here's what I need you to do. Go back to Egypt. Go back to Pharaoh and say, let my people go. And check this out, Moses. You know what I need you to do? You know what I need you to do? I need you to save them from the hands of the Egyptians. Well, we heard that earlier in Moses' story. He saved these three women by a well in the wilderness in this place called Midian, this place he'd never been, meantime in between time. And he saves them from the hand, delivers them from the hand of the Egyptians. Then fast forward, in this whole time, this formative preparatory time in Midian, he now gets to the other side, and the Lord says, hey, guess what? I'm calling you to do this thing. I need you to save my people, save the Israelites from the hands of the Egyptians. And so Moses' time in Midian wasn't wasted. The Lord was forming him in that time and preparing him for what the Lord was going to call him to do next. Similarly, once Moses pulls the children of Israel out of their slavery in Egypt, he has to lead them through the wilderness. So my man Moses is right back to the wilderness. And we talked about this at Winter Retreat, but actually in the book of Numbers in your Bible, the book of Numbers actually is way cooler in the Hebrew Bible, or in the Hebrew language Bible. It's actually Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness. And it's the story of the Israelites going from Egypt to the promised land, and they have to go through wilderness to get there. And in this time of isolation in the wilderness, in this time of in-between and uncertainty and when is when and who is who and what is what, the Lord is forming the people. He's shaping the people of Israel to how he needs them to be. And he's preparing them for what they're going to be called to do. Because when they go into the promised land, they're going to be called eventually to be a light unto all the nations and to point all other nations to the one true living God. But they got to go through some junk first and through some wilderness first. And so they experience these trials in the wilderness. They fail again and again. They get punished several times. They have several victories, and they have several instances where they do the right thing. They receive the law of the Lord, and that's formative for their lives, and it makes them who they are, which is preparing them for who they're going to be called to be. And so we see that in the story of Israel. From Moses to the children of Israel, there's this time where they're isolated. They're socially distanced from everything they've known. But it was a time that was not wasted, because it was forming them into who the Lord needed them to be. It was preparing them for what the Lord was going to call them to do. And there was purpose in the process. It was not pointless. And the last example, I want to actually jump to the New Testament for this one other example. We talked about the Apostle Paul last week, and I love talking about my man, the Apostle Paul. And the Apostle Paul had this incredible experience where he's on this road to a place called Damascus. And so he's kind of on this, like in this wilderness section of road between, where he had been and where he was going, and the Lord met him there, as the Lord does, meeting us in the meantime, in the between time, in the wilderness. And he has this vision of Jesus that actually other people see too. His life has changed, and Jesus appears before him and goes, "Hey, Paul." Actually calls him Saul or Shaul. It's his actual name. He never changes his name either. Get that straight. His birth name, his Hebrew name is Shaul. He appears to him and he goes, "Shaul, bro, why are you persecuting my people? Don't you know you're persecuting me? I'm going to ask you to stop that pretty quick." And then Jesus says, "Hey, you're actually going to be my messenger to all peoples now. How about that?" And so Paul goes on, and the rest of his life, he's going to be a missionary and proclaim the gospel of Jesus, tell the story of Jesus, tell the resurrection of Jesus to all peoples. But some people think that Paul had this amazing experience, this vision of Jesus, this amazing occurrence on this road, this meantime in between time, and then all of a sudden he's like, "All right, time to go start writing books of the Bible. All right, time to start to go on all my mission trips and become famous." No. We actually know in one of Paul's early letters, the letter to this church, it's called Galatians. Early on, the first chapter of Galatians, it's really subtle, blink and you might miss it. Paul actually says that after he was converted and became a Jesus follower, he took 3 years to go to this place called Arabia. Now, we're not 100% certain where this was, but that's nerdery we don't need to get into. But he just goes out of context, out of what he knew, withdrawing, kind of socially distant, kind of isolated from what he had known for 3 years. And scholars believe that Paul used this time to prepare himself, to iron out his faith, to kind of craft his message, to learn through hard knocks. A lot of people use biblical evidence to say that actually Paul was witnessing to formerly Babylonian Jewish people, and it didn't go well, and they actually started plotting against him, and they would actually kind of chase him around and follow him around his entire life. But Paul's 3 years in Arabia were formative. The Lord was kind of crafting him and forming him into who he needed him to be, and he was preparing Paul for what he was going to call Paul to do. So I would argue in those 3 years that Paul was in Arabia, man, he was learning important lessons, valuable lessons. He was becoming the man that the Lord needed him to be to accomplish the mission the Lord was calling him to do. And so it wasn't wasted. His time wasn't wasted in Arabia. Those 3 years, some call them like the lost years of Paul. I wouldn't call them that. I would call it the 3 formative years of Paul, the 3 preparatory years of Paul. And so let's talk about us. And let's get back to our questions. What if the Lord is using this time to bring about a good from really bad, like a real bad situation? And what if this season of isolation actually isn't the worst thing, and there can actually be advantages to it? I know for myself, as I alluded to earlier, and this is why I started this way, I'm super extroverted and I cannot work around people. Some people will go, is it because they annoy you? No, opposite. Because I love them and I'll go crazy. Oh, is it because you don't like being around people? It's No. I love being around people too much. I have to work by myself. Isolation is actually advantageous to me. My team actually knows this. At work, I'll tell them things like, hey guys, I'm going to go crawl in a hole, or I'm going to go hide so I can get some work done. Because for me, isolation helps me focus and have clarity and hear from the Lord. So what if during this time of isolation, this is a time for you to focus on growing in the grace and knowledge of the Lord, of growing in your intimacy and your discipleship and following Jesus, and actually listening and hearing from the Lord? Because when we're not isolated, I know for me, sometimes I get running 1,000,000 miles an hour and I start doing 1,000,000 different things, and I start talking to 1,000 different people, and people will be like, well, I heard a word from the Lord. And I'll be like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm too busy doing like what God called me to do that, like, we haven't talked in a second. Like, I mean, we'll catch up, right? Like, we'll catch up, Lord, but like, I'm doing like your stuff. I'm doing what you call me to do. And so sometimes seasons of isolation are good for me because I can go, what am I doing? I just slow down and hear from the Lord. Slow down and focus on what the Lord's actually calling me to do. And so I've actually built into my time in the morning. It's the same time I work out. It's the same time I do my prayer, my quiet time. I built in time to just be quiet and listen. And that isolation is good. And so I would say in this time of isolation, hey, this is a time that can be good for you to focus, to listen, to clarify, to allow the Lord to speak into your life. And I know that seems a little more vague, but maybe that's something we need to do. We'll get to some more concrete things. But then kind of our central thing today is, what if during this time of isolation, it's a time of formation and preparation, and that the Lord is crafting and shaping and molding you to be the person that he needs you to be, to look more like Jesus, in order to prepare you for what he will call you to do, to prepare you for what he's going to call you to do. And think of it this way. Seasons of preparation and training are important, even if they're seasons of testing and trial and struggle and difficulty. The Marietta football team won the state championship this year. And when it was in season and they were playing, we heard about them in the paper. We read about them in the paper. We heard about them on the news. It was a big deal. You talked to anyone, they talked about them. Nobody talks about them right now. It's off season. They're kind of isolated. They're all just, they're locked in the weight room, just getting reps in. They're getting bigger, faster, stronger. So in this time of isolation, they're working, they're forming themselves. They're becoming better athletes. They're watching game film and they're getting smarter and they're becoming better players. And we need those times in our life. You need those times in your life. I need those times in my life. So there's these formative times. So maybe in your faith, this is a formative time for you to kind of step back and watch game film of your life and be like, what have I been doing? Let me take assessment of what's going on. And to start bolstering like, hey, you know what? I do very little to invest in my walk with Jesus or my spiritual life. Maybe I need to invest more. And again, we're going to give you resources at the end to do that. And these seasons of formation and preparation are pivotal. They're vital. Even let's look at the field of the arts. I kind of unabashedly like this rapper. I'm not advertising. I'm not saying to listen to him, but I grew up liking this rapper named Kanye. Everyone knows Kanye. And on Kanye's first album, which he took years to make, he talks about, and when I read about Paul taking 3 years in Arabia, I thought about it this week. He talks about how he made 5 beats a day for 3 summers. He made 5 beats a day for 3 summers. He kind of came up actually just making beats. He wasn't really like a recording artist. He just made beats for other people. And he worked at his craft during this time where he was kind of isolated from everyone. He wasn't in this public spotlight. He wasn't famous. And so he just made 5 beats a day for 3 summers. So I think kind of like Paul being in Arabia, my man was making 5 beats a day for 3 summers. He was working on his craft, maybe of preaching and of sharing the good news, maybe just of learning about his faith and ironing it out. He didn't just jump right in. So just like Kanye didn't just jump right into making beats for people or to rapping, and just like Paul didn't jump right in to be like, oh, I'll go on a mission trip, when he did not know what to expect and was not prepared, maybe we need to use this time for that same kind of formation, getting ready for the thing that we're going to be called to do. Similarly, oh my gosh, I've been watching this thing called The Last Dance. It's a documentary on Michael Jordan's last season with the Chicago Bulls. It's only the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And in this documentary, the coach of the Chicago Bulls, one of the most accomplished basketball coaches of all time, is this guy named Phil Jackson. And I didn't know, before Phil Jackson was a famous basketball coach who would go on to win, like, I think 11 championships. Like, he's running out of fingies to put rings on. He actually went and coached in a Puerto Rican league or something like that. And it was like a league no one wanted to coach in. There wasn't any like famous players. He didn't make much money. But man, that was a formative experience for him. He learned things, and he learned resolve and confidence and offenses that would be advantageous for him later on down the road. It helped form who he was as a coach. It helped prepare him for what he was going to go on to do as an NBA player. Similarly, in the same documentary, you read about how Michael Jordan had to play this team called the Detroit Pistons. And MJ used to be a little bit more scrawny, a little more skinny, and the Pistons were this tough team. And so all they did for like 3 years in the playoffs would beat MJ up. They'd push him around, they'd punch him, they'd trip him, and they would boss hog him, and they would just use their muscle against his athleticism. Well, Michael Jordan got tired of it. And so in the offseason, he sequestered himself to the weight room. He isolated himself, and he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to like advertise this. You know, ESPN isn't going to show highlights of my bench press set. But he went and put on muscle, and he went and put on weight so that he could form himself and prepare himself for what he had in that upcoming season. And he went on to beat the Pistons because he was tougher. He said he wanted to start to inflict punishment and deliver punishment rather than just taking it. So he had to prepare himself. And the time in the weight room was not wasted. And the time where he didn't get to go to the finals because he got beat, that defeat, that wasn't wasted. It was formative for him. It prepared him. And similar in this situation, this is not a wasted time for you. This is a formative time. This time can be used to prepare you for the next thing the Lord is going to call you to do, which we will get to. Even I listened to a couple of podcasts with like comedians, because I think comedians are very fascinating. And a lot of them talk about, man, I was doing like trash shows. Like, I don't know, I was doing a comedy show and at some circus in like Southeast Kansas. But they all say they wouldn't trade it because those experiences weren't wasted. They were formative. They learned things. They learned how to play to a tough crowd. They learned how to play to a crowd that had no idea who they were. And those were all formative experiences that made them who they were and prepared them for what they were going to do down the road. And just look at your lives. School is supposed to be formative. It teaches you and prepares you for college. College is formative. It prepares you for life and a career, and it teaches you how to form a worldview and how to process arguments and how to make smart, intelligent decisions. None of it's wasted. I've been in seminary for, I forget how long. No, I'm finishing seminary actually this month, and I could have just decided, hey, I feel called to be a pastor. I'm going to just jump right into that. But that's not what Paul did when he had an encounter with Jesus and was called to preach the gospel to the nations. No, my man Paul went to Arabia for 3 years, making 5 beats a day for 3 summers. He got his mind right. He went and got maybe some training. He went and prayed, and he went and got coached up. And so that's why I wanted to do a seminary. I didn't want to hop right into it. And so now I'm wrapping it up, and I think that was the right thing to do because I've had so many formative experiences in seminary, and all of them have prepared me to do what the Lord has called me to do. And so you guys have this time, perhaps you have this time in your life to do that same thing. And maybe you have a different calling on your life. Maybe the Lord is preparing you because, well, quite frankly, you're going to be the only Jesus that some of your friends and family see and experience. You're going to be the only, as the gospel is described, the only light in the darkness, the only salt of the earth, the only city on a hill for some of your friends and family and relatives. Maybe he's preparing you for when you go back to school and, you know, there's all these competing things for your attention and there's all these, you know, friends that maybe could be a bad influence. Maybe the Lord's preparing you in this time to hop back in that race and be more spiritually formed and be more prepared for what is ahead of you. Maybe with some of you, the Lord is using this time to speak into your life and to inspire you that, hey, you're going to go into ministry someday, so just start getting ready. Quite frankly, I knew at a pretty young age, so be open to that, you know? I mean, especially you seniors, you're on the precipice of this. Some of you might think, you know what, maybe I'm going to go to a Bible college, or maybe I'm just going to get a degree in communication and go into seminary. So the Lord, I would argue, is using this time of isolation for your formation and preparation for what he is going to call you to do. And I would say the Lord is even using this time for formation and preparation in you for future disruptions. I mean, any difficult thing we go through in life, it prepares us for what is ahead. And so people, man, I'm big on this. People that I know who have suffered a lot, they are some of the most well-adjusted people. Because like, yeah, I've been disrupted before, bro. Like, I already been there. The Lord already worked that out of me. My need to control and get stressed out. The Lord already worked that out of me years ago. It's an ongoing thing, but the Lord's kind of worked that out. He crushed that. Or it's like, oh no, I'm prepared for this because I've gone through it before. So those people that have been disrupted a lot, they tend to be well-adjusted. And those people who have suffered a lot tend to have a good sense of humor about things and sense of levity, because they're like, I mean, what are you going to control, you know? And so maybe in this situation, the Lord is forming you in that way and preparing you for future disruptions and difficulties. Maybe that's what's going on. But either way, I need you to know that there is purpose in this process. It's not wasted. And in fact, in Romans 8, Paul writes this, our man Paul, in Arabia, making 5 beats a day for 3 summers. He says this, he says, for we know that in all things God works together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. And so the Lord is working out a good here. This isn't wasted. I know in my life, I've never gone through anything that I looked back on and went, what was the point of that? No, it was formative and it prepared me for something else. I think I've told you guys, I went to this clinic called the Mayo Clinic, and it was a horrible experience and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. And it was one of the worst times of my life. But I don't look back at it and go, well, that was a waste. No, you kidding me? It taught me about suffering. It taught me about trusting the Lord. It taught me about how the Lord can make good from a bad situation. That's why I taught you guys about this stuff. I've had work experiences where I'm like, man, that was really painful, really hurtful. Man, there's been seasons of my life where I showed up on a Monday not knowing if I'd have a job on Tuesday. And I don't look back and go, man, I wish the Lord would have spared me from that one. That was trash. No, like that was a formative experience. That was preparing me for stuff down the road. So now there's certain things in my life that when I've experienced them, I'm more well-formed and prepared for those things. I'm more spiritually mature, hopefully a little more like Jesus than I was back then. And so the Lord met me in the meantime, in between time, the mystery, the wilderness, and that was a place of formation and preparation for me moving forward. And perhaps that is for you too. And so in this time of formation and preparation, I want to hit you with some real quick resources. One, man, just dive into the Word. Now I know what you're thinking, like, oh, what do you know? A pastor's telling us to read the Bible. Hey, I get it. I hate when people like throw a Bible at new Christians, like, read it! And they don't tell them how. Because the Bible's not the easiest book to read. Let's just be real. Real talk. But start pouring into the Word. Join a Bible study. We're actually launching a Zoom Bible study in a week from Wednesday. So there'll be more on that on our social media this week. Get plugged into that. That can be helpful to you. Do what I do. Listen to podcasts. I'll read through something in the Bible and be like, bro, I've been in seminary for 6 years. It's supposed to only be 4, but I did it in 6. What? But I'll be reading something and I'm like, bro, I'm not real clear on this. I'll listen to a podcast on it. I just literally will type in the search, the passage I'm in, and I'll listen to someone say something about it. And we have some resources we can provide. The Bible Project's a great one. Bible study tools is a great one. There's a lot of stuff like that. So you can either get in a Bible study with us, which you'll hear more on, or we can roll out some resources for you, which we're going to do. I would also say, keep following us on IGTV and on YouTube and on our feed as we drop chunks of the sermon throughout the week. Those can be spiritually formative for you. Those can be helpful. Even this message, this will help you start thinking a different way about this time of isolation and this time of in the wilderness of uncertainty. And we're offering Zoom groups now. Get plugged into a Zoom group. You're going to hear a lot more on that in this upcoming week. We got some new stuff in the works for that. Get involved with your group. Read the Word together. The Word of God was intended to be studied together, not in isolation. I'm going to just say that. And so we have Zoom, so even in isolation, we can stay connected as the church scattered. Flashback to last week. So get involved in your group. Ask questions of your group leaders. Send me questions. I'll answer your questions. Use this time to get ready, to fill yourself up so you're more well formed spiritually and more prepared to go back into whatever the Lord is going to call you to do, or whatever he's going to call you to do down the road. Get ready. And lastly, use this time to dream. Use this time to seek the Lord and ask, Lord, what do you have for me? What can I do for the kingdom? What can I do to be a blessing to others? To be a blessing to you, Lord? How can I serve in North Metro in a particular way? Can I do something at my school? Who are the least of these I need to move towards? Society's hurting right now. And we have some things as North Metro Church where you can get involved in serving and helping our community. So those are just some resources I want you to take advantage of, and you'll hear more about on our social media this week. In this time of isolation and formation and preparation for what the Lord will call you to do. And so I want to hit you with this verse as we walk it out here. In this time, I want you to write this verse down. I don't know, print it on a t-shirt, whatever you want to do. The book of James, he says this in the first chapter. He says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you endure trials of many kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith," and man, our faith is being tested, "the testing of your faith develops perseverance," or endurance. And perseverance or endurance must work itself out in you, or have its full effect, so that you may be complete and whole, lacking nothing. So in this time of wilderness, this time of uncertainty, this time of weird meantime in between time, this time of isolation, know that this is developing perseverance. And it's working things out in you. It's formative and it's preparatory. And you're getting prepared to do what the Lord will call you to do. And in that process, I need you to know that there's purpose. There's all kinds of purpose in the process. And let that encourage you today as we ask, what if through this time of isolation, the Lord is actually working some good from this bad? Grace and peace to you guys.